The projector hummed as my final slide appeared, a sleek redesign for our flagship software that I'd spent months perfecting. My hands trembled slightly, but not from nerves. This was my moment to prove that 7 years of loyalty still counted for something. This new interface will cut user onboarding time by 40%, I began, pointing to the clean mock-ups on screen. Our biggest client specifically mentioned wanting faster. Jane. Oscar Dalton's voice cut through the room like a blade. Our new boss leaned back in his leather chair, that familiar smirk spreading across his face. Take your stupid opinion somewhere else. The words hung in the air. 3 senior managers stopped writing mid-sentence. The room fell dead silent. My cheeks burned, but I kept my expression neutral. All right, I said quietly, closing my laptop with a soft click. I will. Something flickered in Oscar's eyes. Satisfaction, like he just swatted away an annoying fly. He had no idea that I meant those words literally, and not in the way he thought. As I gathered my papers, one thought crystallized in my mind. He just made the biggest mistake of his career. My name is Jane Collins. I'm 34 years old, and I've been a senior product designer at Jade Solutions for 7 years. 7 years of late nights, weekend debugging sessions, and cleaning up other people's mistakes. 7 years of building something I was proud of. I started here fresh out of college, eager and wide-eyed. Back then, the company felt like a family. My old manager, Kate, actually listened to ideas. She encouraged innovation. Under her leadership, I helped launch 3 successful products that brought in millions in revenue. I designed user interfaces that turned confused customers into loyal advocates. My work had saved failing product launches and secured client renewals that kept our lights on. I wasn't just another employee, I was part of the foundation. But Kate got promoted to corporate 6 months ago. That's when everything started falling apart. That's when Oscar Dalton walked through our doors with his expensive suits, his condescending smile, and his complete certainty that everyone here was doing everything wrong. He'd been here exactly 2 months and 4 days. I was counting. Oscar arrived like a wrecking ball wrapped in a business plan. Former VP of product at some Silicon Valley startup that had burned through investor money before crashing spectacularly. Somehow, that failure had earned him our top spot. His first week, he called an all-hands meeting. We're going to modernize everything, he announced, gesturing broadly at our workspace. Clean slate, fresh perspectives, no sacred cows. What that really meant was tearing apart systems that actually worked and replacing them with his half-baked ideas from his failed company. He scrapped our proven design workflows. He reassigned major projects to his old buddies from California, people he'd flown in at company expense despite us having perfectly capable designers already. He treated anyone with institutional knowledge like dead weight. But the worst part? He seemed to take personal pleasure in shutting down ideas that weren't his own, especially mine. In every meeting, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence. He'd laugh dismissively at suggestions I'd researched for weeks. He'd forget to include me in critical project updates, then blame me for being out of the loop. It wasn't just bad management. It felt personal. That redesign Oscar had just called a stupid opinion? I'd been developing it for 4 months, working nights and weekends to get it right. It started when our biggest client, Atlas Corp, complained about user confusion in our software. Their employees were taking weeks to learn basic functions. Training costs were eating into their budget, and they were starting to look at competitors. I'd interviewed dozens of users, analyzed heat maps, and run usability tests. The problem was clear. Our interface had grown cluttered over years of quick fixes and feature additions. Users couldn't find what they needed. My solution was elegant in its simplicity. Clean navigation, intuitive icons, streamlined workflows. I'd built working prototypes and tested them extensively. Early users could complete tasks in half the time. The numbers were incredible. 40% faster onboarding, 60% fewer support tickets, 90% user satisfaction in preliminary tests. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a revolution. But Oscar didn't want to hear about user research or data. He wanted flashy features and buzzword-heavy presentations that impressed executives who didn't actually use the software. My careful, methodical approach wasn't sexy enough for his taste. The public humiliation in that conference room wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of 2 months of systematic erosion. Every meeting became a performance where Oscar demonstrated his authority by diminishing mine. He'd cut me off mid-sentence, roll his eyes at my suggestions, or simply ignore me entirely while praising identical ideas when they came from his California cronies. He'd schedule important project discussions for times when I was in client meetings, then blame me for missing critical decisions. He'd reassign my work to other designers without explanation, leaving me scrambling to understand my own role. The worst part was watching my colleagues' reactions. People I'd worked with for years started avoiding eye contact. They'd stop talking when I entered rooms. No one wanted to be associated with Oscar's target. I understood their position. In a small company, crossing the boss meant career suicide. But understanding didn't make the isolation hurt less. Mike from engineering still nodded hello in the hallway. Amy from marketing would smile sympathetically. But those brief moments of human connection only highlighted how alone I'd become in my own workplace. Oscar was slowly erasing me from the company I'd helped build. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands still shaking from the day's humiliation. I'd reached my breaking point, but instead of despair, I felt something else. Clarity. I wasn't going to quit in tears and let Oscar claim victory. I wasn't going to slink away defeated while he destroyed everything I'd worked to build. And I definitely wasn't going to let him bury a design that could genuinely help people. If Oscar wanted me to take my opinion elsewhere, I'd do exactly that. But elsewhere would be somewhere my work would be valued, implemented, and celebrated. Somewhere it could achieve its full potential while Oscar watched his empire crumble. I started my car and drove home, my mind already formulating a plan. The redesign wasn't dead, it was just moving to a new home. And when it found success elsewhere, Oscar would realize too late what he'd thrown away. He thought he was getting rid of a problem employee. What he was actually doing was handing his biggest competitive advantage to someone who knew exactly how to use it. My phone buzzed. A text from Amy. "Are you okay? That was awful." I typed back, "Better than okay. Thanks for asking." Over the next few days, I made a crucial decision. Instead of abandoning my redesign, I quietly shifted it into my personal project folder. This was tricky legal territory, but I'd been smart from the beginning. All my user research had been conducted on my own time, using my personal laptop. The interviews, the testing, the prototype development, none of it had used company resources or company time. I'd been careful about intellectual property rights after hearing horror stories from other designers. My employment contract gave the company rights to work created using company resources during company time. My redesign fell into a gray area that favored me. I spent evenings cleaning up my documentation, making sure every timestamp and email could prove I'd developed this independently. I organized user feedback, compiled test results, and polished the prototype until it gleamed. At work, I played the part of the defeated employee. I took on the mundane tasks Oscar assigned without complaint. I attended meetings quietly, speaking only when directly asked questions. I made myself invisible. Oscar seemed pleased with my newfound compliance. In the break room, I overheard him telling Tom from sales that he'd finally gotten Jane in line. Perfect. Let him think he'd won. While Oscar celebrated his imaginary victory, I was making phone calls. Amelia Rodriguez had been my manager 3 years ago before she left for a creative director position at Kestrel Solution, our biggest competitor. We'd stayed in touch through LinkedIn messages and occasional coffee meetings. Amelia was everything Oscar wasn't. Collaborative, insightful, and genuinely interested in user experience over flashy features. Under her leadership, our team had produced some of our best work. "Jane." Her voice was warm when I called. "How are you holding up over there? I keep hearing interesting stories about your new management." Industry gossip traveled fast. Oscar's management style was already becoming a cautionary tale among local design circles. "Actually, that's why I'm calling," I said carefully. "I've been working on something that might interest you. Do you have time for coffee this week?" "Always," she replied immediately. "I'm actually looking for fresh perspectives on a UI overhaul we're planning." Funny coincidence. It wasn't coincidence. It was opportunity. Amelia had been watching Oscar's destructive management from afar, and she knew talent when she saw it. She'd been waiting for this call. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from both our offices. Amelia looked exactly the same, confident, sharp, with a kind of focused energy that made you want to do your best work. "Show me what you've got," she said after we'd caught up on pleasantries. I opened my laptop and walked her through the redesign. Her eyes lit up immediately. She asked smart questions about user testing methodologies, scalability, and implementation timelines. These were the conversations I'd been craving for months. "This is exactly what we need," she said finally. "Our clients have been complaining about the same issues your research identified. How wedded are you to implementing this at Jade Solution?" I laughed, probably the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. "Let's just say the current management isn't receptive to user-centered design approaches." Amelia nodded knowingly. "Oscar's reputation precedes him. Word is, he's already alienated half your development team." She leaned forward. "What if I told you we have an opening for a senior UX designer? Full creative control, budget for proper user research, and a team that actually listens to data over opinions." My heart rate quickened. "I'd say that sounds too good to be true." "It's not," Amelia smiled. "Think about it. Back at Jade Solution, Oscar's golden boy was having problems. Alex Clinton, one of the designers Oscar had imported from California, had been rushing to launch a new client dashboard, the same project Oscar had yanked away from me and handed to him. Alex was talented but inexperienced with our specific user base. He'd designed something that looked impressive in presentations but ignored fundamental usability principles. The interface was cluttered, the navigation was confusing, and the loading times were terrible. Demo day arrived. Our biggest client, Atlas Corp, sent their executive team to see the new dashboard that Oscar had promised would revolutionize their workflow. I watched from my desk as Alex frantically tried to load the demo. The screen froze twice. When it finally worked, the executives looked confused and unimpressed. One actually asked if they could go back to the old version. Oscar's face went red. After the clients left, he stormed into Alex's cubicle and started shouting about basic competence and professional standards. My phone buzzed. A text from Atlas's IT director, someone I'd worked with extensively. "Jane, can we chat sometime?" "Privately?" I glanced around the office. Oscar was still berating Alex. No one was paying attention to me. I typed back, "Of course, when works for you?" I met Ivan Powell, Atlas's IT director, at a restaurant across town. We'd collaborated on several successful integrations over the years, and he'd always appreciated my thorough, user-focused approach. "That demo was a disaster," he said without preamble. "We've been your client for 3 years, and we've never seen anything that unprofessional." I nodded sympathetically. "There have been some management changes. The new approach prioritizes different things." "What happened to that redesign you mentioned a few months ago? The one that was supposed to address our onboarding issues?" My pulse quickened. This was the opening I'd been hoping for. "I'm not sure the current leadership wants to pursue that direction," I said carefully. "But I've continued developing it on my own time. Would you be interested in seeing what it looks like now?" Ivan's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. Our training costs are killing us. If you have something that could help, I want to see it." I opened my laptop and showed him the polished prototype. His reaction was everything I'd hoped for: excitement, understanding, and immediate recognition of the value proposition. "This is exactly what we need," he said. "If you ever left Jade Solution, we'd seriously consider following you." That sentence changed everything. The next day, Oscar called an emergency team meeting. The failed demo had apparently triggered some uncomfortable conversations with upper management. "Yesterday's presentation didn't meet our standards," he announced, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We need to identify the root causes of these issues." What followed was a masterclass in blame shifting. According to Oscar, the dashboard problems stemmed from legacy design flaws inherited from previous leadership. Specifically, he claimed infrastructure decisions I'd made 2 years ago had created limitations that forced Alex to compromise his vision. It was complete nonsense. The infrastructure was solid. I designed it to be flexible and scalable. Alex's problems came from ignoring user research and rushing development to meet Oscar's arbitrary deadlines. But Oscar needed a scapegoat, and I was convenient. Moving forward, he continued, we'll be conducting a full audit of all legacy design decisions to prevent future issues. Tom from sales shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Amy from marketing stared at her laptop screen. Mike from engineering caught my eye and shook his head slightly. They all knew this was unfair, but no one was willing to speak up. I understood their position, but it still stung. After the meeting, Mike approached my desk. You know that's bull, right? Your infrastructure is solid. Thanks, I said quietly. I appreciate that. That evening, I sent Amelia a carefully worded email. Following up on our conversation, I'm ready to explore new opportunities. Her response came within an hour. Perfect timing. Can you start next month? We arranged a formal interview for the following week, though we both knew it was a formality. Amelia had seen my work and understood my value. More importantly, she'd heard about Oscar's management style through industry connections. We've been watching Jade Solutions' talent exodus, she told me during our phone call. Half your engineering team has reached out to us in the past month. Oscar's making our recruiting much easier. I wasn't surprised. Mike had mentioned that 3 developers were updating their resumes. Amy from marketing had been taking mysterious dentist appointments that probably involved interviews elsewhere. Oscar's slash-and-burn approach was destroying the company from within, but he was too arrogant to notice. He thought fear was motivating people to work harder. Instead, it was motivating them to work elsewhere. Amelia's offer was generous, a 20% salary increase, equity in the company, and full creative control over my projects. But the real attraction was the chance to implement my redesign properly, with adequate resources and timeline. When can you start? Amelia asked. I need to give 2 weeks' notice, I replied. Professional courtesy. Amelia laughed. After the stories I've heard, you're more professional than Oscar deserves. I submitted my resignation letter on a Friday afternoon, timing it perfectly. Oscar was in back-to-back meetings, and most of the team had already left for the weekend. I placed the envelope on his desk and quietly cleaned out my workspace. 7 years of memories fit into 2 small boxes. Family photos, a coffee mug from our successful product launch, and a small succulent plant that had somehow survived the office's fluorescent lighting. Amy found me packing and immediately teared up. I can't believe you're really leaving, she said. This place won't be the same without you. You'll be fine, I assured her. You're strong and talented. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Mike stopped by as I was loading my boxes into my car. You're making the right choice, he said. This place is toxic now. Half the team is going to follow you out the door. Take care of yourself, I replied, and keep pushing for user research. The data matters, even when leadership doesn't want to hear it. Monday morning, I woke up unemployed for the first time in 7 years. It should have felt scary. Instead, it felt like freedom. My last day at Jade Solution was surreal. Oscar barely acknowledged my departure, waving dismissively when I stopped by his office to hand over project files. Couldn't handle the pace, I guess, he said without looking up from his computer. We'll manage fine without you. I smiled politely and left him to his delusions. 2 weeks later, I started at Kestrel Solution. Amelia had assembled a small team to work on implementing my redesign, and the energy was immediately different. People asked questions because they wanted to understand, not because they wanted to prove me wrong. We refined the prototype, conducted additional user testing, and began building the production version. The timeline was aggressive but realistic. We'd launch in 6 weeks with a pilot group, then roll out broadly based on feedback. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Jade Solution through mutual connections. Oscar's golden boy, Alex, was struggling with the dashboard fixes. 3 more engineers had quit. The biggest client, Atlas Corp, was asking pointed questions about project timelines and deliverables. Ivan Powell from Atlas called me during my 2nd week at Kestrel Solution. How's the new job? He asked. Excellent, I replied honestly. How are things with the dashboard project? There was a long pause. Not good, we're considering our options. 6 weeks later, we launched the redesign as Kestrel Solution new flagship interface. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections. Beta users completed onboarding tasks 60% faster than with any competing software. Support ticket volume dropped by half. User satisfaction scores were the highest Amelia's team had ever recorded. Industry publications took notice. Tech Daily wrote a feature about intuitive design that actually works. Design Week included our interface in their monthly showcase of exceptional user experiences. More importantly, potential clients were calling. Companies that had struggled with user adoption were eager to see demos. Ivan Powell scheduled a formal presentation for Atlas's executive team. After years of working with Jade Solution, he wanted to evaluate alternatives. The presentation went flawlessly. Executives who had seemed confused during Alex's disastrous demo were asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and pricing. "This is exactly what we've been asking for," Atlas's CEO said after the demo. "Clean, intuitive, powerful. When can we start the transition?" Amelia and I exchanged glances. "We can begin immediately," Amelia replied. "Our implementation team is ready." Within a week, Atlas Corp signed a 3-year contract with Kestrel Solution. The deal was worth more than Jade Solution's entire annual revenue from them. News of Atlas's defection hit Jade Solution like a tsunami. Oscar called an emergency meeting, demanding explanations for how their biggest client had suddenly decided to switch providers. According to Amy, who texted me regular updates, Oscar was frantically trying to understand what had gone wrong. He blamed Alex for the failed demo, the sales team for not maintaining relationships, and upper management for not providing adequate resources. What he didn't understand was that clients don't leave overnight. They leave after months of frustration, poor communication, and feeling unheard. Atlas had been unhappy for a year. They'd just finally found a better alternative. Tom from sales reportedly tried to explain this during the meeting, but Oscar shut him down. In Oscar's worldview, client relationships were about impressive presentations and buzzword-heavy pitches, not consistent delivery and genuine problem-solving. 2 days later, a second client announced they were exploring options. Then a third. Amelia called me into her office. "We just got 3 more demo requests," she said with a grin. "All former Jade Solution clients. Word is spreading fast." I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that my work was being valued, but sadness that Jade Solution was imploding. I genuinely loved that company once. The tipping point came when Jade Solution's board of directors demanded a formal review of Oscar's performance. Losing their biggest client after just 4 months of his leadership had triggered serious questions about his strategy. Mike texted me, "Board meeting today." Oscar scrambling to blame everyone except himself. I'd heard through Amy that Oscar was claiming Atlas's departure was part of a larger market downturn affecting all software companies. But that narrative fell apart when other companies in our space were reporting strong growth. Kestrel Solution, in particular, was having its best quarter in company history, largely due to former Jade Solution clients switching providers. Amelia was fielding calls from executive recruiters asking about Oscar's available talent. His mismanagement had created a pool of experienced professionals eager for better opportunities. "We're going to expand the team," Amelia told me. "Want to help me recruit some of your former colleagues?" I thought about Mike's engineering expertise, Amy's marketing insights, and Tom's client relationships. They were all talented professionals trapped under terrible leadership. "Absolutely," I replied. "I know exactly who we should call." Oscar's downfall accelerated rapidly after the board review. According to multiple sources, the meeting had been brutal. Directors questioned his client retention strategies, his team management approach, and his decision to abandon proven design methodologies. He tried to blame external factors, market conditions, unfair competition, inherited problems from previous leadership. But the board had done their homework. They knew that Kestrel Solution was thriving while Jade Solution was struggling, and they understood the timeline of changes. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Jade Solution announced that Oscar was pursuing new opportunities. The press release thanked him for his innovative approach and wished him well in future endeavors. Translation: he'd been fired. Alex and 2 other California imports left immediately afterward. Without Oscar's protection, they were exposed as expensive hires who hadn't delivered results. Amy called me that evening, barely containing her excitement. "He's gone. Oscar's actually gone." I felt relief, but also something like pity. Oscar wasn't evil, just arrogant and insecure. His need to prove himself had blinded him to the talent around him. What happens now? I asked. Kate's coming back as interim director, Amy said. She wants to rebuild bridges with former employees. Kate reached out to me the following week. Our conversation was warm but bittersweet. I heard about the Atlas contract, she said. Congratulations, that redesign was brilliant, exactly what they needed. Thank you, I replied. It found the right home. Kate sighed. I'm sorry about what happened with Oscar. I knew his management style was problematic, but I didn't realize how bad things had gotten until after Atlas left. We talked about the damage and the path forward. Kate was genuinely committed to rebuilding Jade Solutions' culture and reputation, but it would take time. Trust, once broken, was difficult to repair. Would you ever consider coming back? She asked finally. I appreciated the offer, but my answer was easy. I'm happy where I am. Amelia's built something special here. Kate understood. If you change your mind, the door's always open. And if any of your colleagues want to return, we'd welcome them. Some bridges could be rebuilt. Others had been burned too thoroughly to repair. I was content watching from a distance as Jade Solution tried to recover from Oscar's brief but destructive tenure. 6 months later, I was leading Kestrel Solution, design team, and loving every minute of it. My redesign had become the foundation for 3 additional products, each one more successful than the last. We'd hired Mike from engineering and Amy from marketing. Tom from sales had joined us as well, bringing several client relationships with him. The former Jade Solution contingent was thriving in an environment that valued their expertise. Oscar, meanwhile, had disappeared from our professional circle entirely. LinkedIn showed he'd moved back to California, but there was no indication of new employment. His failure at Jade Solutions seemed to have damaged his reputation throughout the industry. I occasionally wondered if he'd learned anything from the experience. Did he understand that talent comes in many forms? Did he recognize that dismissing good ideas simply because they weren't his own was a path to irrelevance? Probably not. People like Oscar rarely engage in that kind of self-reflection. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I was focused on building something positive, something that demonstrated the value of collaborative leadership and user-centered design. Amelia had promoted me to Director of User Experience with equity and significant creative autonomy. It was everything I'd hoped for when I'd first started at Jade Solutions 7 years earlier. The industry recognition continued to grow. Our redesigned interface won 2 prestigious design awards and was featured in a Harvard Business Review case study about effective user experience strategies. I was invited to speak at conferences about the importance of user research and collaborative design processes. These talks always felt surreal. A year ago, I'd been dismissed as someone with stupid opinions, and now I was considered a thought leader. One presentation particularly stood out. I was speaking at DesignCon about building user-centered organizations when I noticed a familiar face in the audience. It was Alex Clinton, Oscar's former golden boy. He looked uncomfortable but stayed for the entire presentation. Afterward, he approached me nervously. "That was a great talk," he said. "I wanted to apologize for what happened at Jade Solution. I should have spoken up when Oscar was treating you unfairly." I appreciated his honesty. "We were all in a difficult situation," I replied. "How are things going for you now?" "Good," he said. "I'm at a startup downtown. The environment is much more collaborative. I've learned a lot about the importance of user research." It was a small moment of redemption. Alex had been caught up in Oscar's toxic management style, but he was capable of growth and reflection. 2 years after leaving Jade Solution, I received an unexpected message. Atlas Corp wanted to renew their contract early and expand their usage to additional departments. Ivan Powell and I met for lunch to discuss the expansion. "This has been the smoothest software implementation we've ever experienced," he told me. "Our employees actually enjoy using your interface." That sentence encapsulated everything I'd hoped to achieve as a designer, creating tools that people found helpful rather than frustrating. "We're planning a case study about the transition," Ivan continued. "Would you be willing to participate? We think other companies could learn from our experience." I agreed immediately. The case study became a powerful marketing tool for Kestrel Solution and a cautionary tale about the importance of listening to user feedback. Jade's solution, meanwhile, had stabilized under Kate's leadership, but never fully recovered its market position. Several major clients had followed Atlas to competitors, and rebuilding trust was proving difficult. I bore no ill will toward my former company. Kate was doing her best to repair the damage, and many good people still worked there. But their struggles served as a reminder of how quickly things could unravel under poor leadership. Today, I lead a team of 12 designers at Kestrel Solution. We've expanded beyond interface design into comprehensive user experience strategy, working with clients across multiple industries. My original redesign, the one Oscar had dismissed as a stupid opinion, became the foundation for a product line that generated millions in revenue. More importantly, it had helped thousands of users work more efficiently and with less frustration. Amelia was promoted to Chief Product Officer, and she asked me to co-author a book about user-centered design leadership. The book became a bestseller in business and design circles, cementing our reputations as innovative thinkers. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Oscar had been willing to listen. If he'd approached that presentation with curiosity instead of dismissiveness. If he'd valued collaboration over control. Jade Solutions might have launched the redesign successfully, retained their biggest client, and avoided the exodus of talent that followed Oscar's toxic leadership. Instead, his arrogance had created an opportunity for Kestrel Solution to acquire excellent people and proven strategies. I'd taken my stupid opinion elsewhere, as he'd demanded. The results spoke for themselves. Recently, a young designer joined our team straight from college. During her first week, she asked me about handling difficult feedback and dismissive managers. "What if someone tells you your ideas are stupid?" she asked. "How do you stay confident?" I thought about Oscar's smirk, that moment of public humiliation that had felt so devastating at the time. How it had actually been the catalyst for everything good that followed. "Remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions," I told her. "Especially from people who haven't done the work to understand your perspective." I shared the story of my redesign, how months of careful research had been dismissed in a single sentence, and how that dismissal had ultimately led to my greatest professional success. When someone tells you to take your opinion elsewhere, I concluded, sometimes the best response is to do exactly that. Find somewhere that values what you have to offer. She smiled and nodded, and I could see the confidence building in her eyes. Oscar had taught me an invaluable lesson, though not the one he'd intended. He'd shown me that my value wasn't negotiable, that good work speaks for itself, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply being successful somewhere else. His stupid opinion comment had stung in the moment, but it had also set me free.